Hey kids, glad you're back with us this week for Kids Church. Once again, this is going to be our third week that we're in the book of Judges. The book of Judges is an Old Testament book. We're going to be in chapters 6 through 8 today. If you've not been following us and this is the first time, we've spent the last couple of months following the Israelite people. We started with them in bondage and slavery in Egypt, them being led out of that slavery into the wilderness where they wandered for 40 years, and then them finally getting to enter the promised land. The Israelite people had a problem though. They continually chose to do evil in the sight of the Lord, and they selfishly wanted a ruler or a king like their neighboring countries had. They didn't realize the plan that God had for them for a heavenly king and not an earthly king. But God allows them to go through these trials. And we see many times they'll rock along doing so good, and then all of a sudden their leader will die or something will happen and they turn away from the Lord. And when that happens, the Lord allows their enemy to conquer them and to take them over. And then the people have to realize that they're not trusting God again and that they have to cry out to God again and ask Him to rescue them. Well, we saw last week that they had to defeat the Canaanites. And that God had to deliver somebody for them to be able to defeat the Canaanites. This week, once again, the Israelites are doing evil in the sight of the Lord. And He has allowed the Midianite people to take them over and to conquer them. The one thing about the Midianites they were very cruel. It was it was torturous, it was just absolutely awful for the Israelite people because they were so cruel. And so they realized that they've turned away from God and they cried out to God once again, please save us. Well, God sends the angel of the Lord and he came and sat under an oak tree. And he appeared to a man named Gideon. Well, he said, mighty warrior, the Lord is with you. And Gideon's probably looking around thinking, I'm not sure who you're talking to. But it's not me. I'm no mighty warrior. You see, Gideon's family was the weakest family in his tribe. And not only were they the weakest family in the tribe, he was the youngest person in his family. So do you think he was very strong? No. But does God have a way of using people that are kind of the most unlikely people to do His work? We've seen that before, haven't we? Do you think even God can use somebody like you and I? I think you're right. I think God, if we trust and we obey God, God can use anybody to do His work. And that's exciting for you and I. So we've got the angel of the Lord and he appears to Gideon. And that night God told Gideon, he said, go tear down the altar to the false god. And Gideon's thinking, oh, this is not going to be good because if I do this, they're probably going to kill me. Well, Gideon might not have been very strong, but he was smart enough to know that he probably ought to wait till after dark. And so he waits till after dark, after everybody's gone to sleep, and he goes and he tears down this altar. Well, the next morning, you think the people are pretty mad about it? They were absolutely furious, and they wanted to know who did it. And when they found out that Gideon did it, they wanted to kill him. Well, now sometime later, Israel's enemies had gathered together, and so Gideon went and he blew the ram's horn. We've seen this before, haven't we? That the person that God sends to save the Israelite blows the ram horns, and the troops gather. Well, they were ready to go to fight, but Gideon, he wanted a sign from God. He wanted to make sure one more time that this is really what God had intended. And so he took this piece of fleece, which is like a piece of cloth, and he laid it on the ground and he said, God, I tell you what, in the morning, if this piece of cloth is wet and the ground is dry, I'll take that as a sign from you that this is what you want. What do you think happened? You think it was wet? You're right, it was. The next morning, the Bible in the book of Judges tells us that not only was that moisture in that piece of cloth, but there was so much that Gideon was able to take his hands and to wring it out and to fill a bowl full of water from that cloth. Well, Gideon's thinking, oh, this is getting real now. He's really wanting me to lead these people into battle. He said, let's do this one more time, God. But I'm going to reverse it. In the morning, if the cloth is dry, but all of the ground is wet, then I'll know for sure that you really mean for me to lead these people against the Midianites. Well, in the morning, the book of Judges tells us that that piece of cloth was dry, the ground was wet. That was the sign from God. God told Gideon to gather his people, and at this time there's 22,000 Israelites that have come to go and take on the Midianites. But God says, whoa, wait just a second, Gideon. He says, you've got too many troops. Too many? We're going to battle, God. How can we have too many? God said, you have too many. He said, I want you to go and I want you to tell all of the troops that if any of them are afraid to go into battle, to go home right now. So he goes and tells them that, and all of a sudden, a lot of them leave and he's down to 10,000. So over half of his army has left. That's pretty scary, isn't it? But God says, whoa, time out again, Gideon. You still have too many people. And so God gives him a test. He says he wants Gideon to take him down to the river to get a drink. He said, and I want you to set aside all of the ones who, like a dog, bend over and just drink the water. I want you to set them over here. But the ones who kneel down and they scoop it in their hand and they lap it up with their tongue, I want you to set them aside over here. Well, the ones that scooped it up with their hand and stayed alert and lapped it up with their tongue were only 300. And he said, that's it. I want you to take those 300 men and to go and fight the Midianites. The next day, the army carried torches. They blew their trumpets. They shattered pitchers before running toward the camp of the Midianites. God gave Israel the victory. And everyone in the Midianite army, they ran away. And Gideon and his army, they chased them down. The Israelites said to Gideon, rule over us, for you delivered us from the Midianites. Gideon said, no, God will rule over you. But after Gideon died, the Israelites once again did not remember the Lord, who had delivered them from the power of their enemies. You see, kids, the Israelites cried out to God because they knew that they could not save themselves. Even Gideon was not enough to save them. God used Gideon to save his people, but God fought the battle for them. They somehow needed someone to save them. Well, who do you think that someone God has in mind to save them? To save us. That's right, that's Jesus Christ. He came to save us from our sin because we cannot save ourselves. Only God, through Christ, can save us. And I hope that you have Christ in your heart. I hope that you've made a commitment to God. If that's something that you haven't and you have some questions or you're wondering about it, I encourage you kids to ask your mom and dad or to ask Pastor Jace or even myself. If you need to call us or text us or use the church email to get a hold of us, we want you to have that relationship with Jesus Christ too. And I encourage you to reach out to us. I appreciate you tuning in this week, and I look forward to next week. I look forward to the time that we're back together in person again, but until then, I hope you'll keep tuning in to the Kids Church Lesson. Thank you.